The crystal chandelier trembled as if even it feared what was about to happen. 100 eyes froze in place when the sound of a sharp slap cracked through the grand banquet hall. Sifa, the young maid with trembling hands still holding a silver tray, staggered back as Naledi Mwale, the glamorous, impossibly wealthy hostess, stood over her with fury burning in her eyes. Music died, conversations died. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Guests exchanged horrified glances, unsure whether to look away or stare. Tawanda Mwale rose halfway from his chair, stunned, but Naledi shot him a glare that warned him not to intervene. All Sifa had done was brush against Naledi's dress while serving wine. Yet the slap had been merciless, humiliating, meant to crush. But what truly sent a shiver through the hall wasn't the slap. It was the moment Sifa slowly lifted her tear-bright eyes and whispered a single sentence that made every guest go silent to their bones. Before we continue, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing our global family together. And if you enjoy powerful African folktale dramas like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story. Naledi Mwale had built her life around one unshakable belief: wealth made her untouchable. And inside the sprawling Mwale estate, a place of marble floors, imported chandeliers and staff who moved like shadows, that belief had only grown stronger with time. To the outside world, Naledi was elegance, charm, and the perfect modern socialite. But within these walls, her perfection was a mask held together by pride and a deep, relentless fear of ever appearing weak. Every morning, the staff lined up in the west hallway before sunrise. They bowed slightly when Naledi passed, never daring to meet her eyes. All except one, Sifa. Not because she was disobedient, but because she always worked with her head lowered, carrying herself with a humility that was almost painful to watch. She moved quietly, spoke softly, and somehow still radiated a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the coldness in this mansion. Sifa had been working here for 8 months, long enough to witness the layers of beauty and cruelty that shaped Naledi's world. But never had she imagined being slapped in front of guests. It wasn't the pain that lingered, it was the humiliation. She had always tried to be invisible, but tonight every pair of eyes in the hall had landed on her. Hours before the banquet, the house was already vibrating with tension. Naledi paced the central lobby, inspecting every detail with an expression of growing annoyance. One flower slightly out of place, one napkin folded imperfectly, all instantly became the fault of Sifa. She had been assigned to assist the event decorator, carry supplies, clean corners that already shone, and follow Naledi's commands without hesitation. Sifa, you walk too slowly. Move with purpose. Yes, madam. Sifa, these glasses are not polished enough. I'll redo them, madam. Sifa, don't breathe over the tablecloth. You'll stain it. Yes, madam. Her responses never changed. Her tone never rose. There was something about her that made even the other maids protective of her, but they couldn't say a word, not when Naledi's temper hovered over them like a storm. Tawanda Mwale noticed it. He always noticed it. Though he rarely intervened, partly out of habit, partly out of exhaustion, he could not ignore the uneasy feeling that Sifa's meekness was hiding something deeper. He often caught glimpses of her in the garden after work, sitting on a low stone bench, clutching her phone and speaking softly to someone on the other end. Sometimes she sounded worried, sometimes she cried silently, and sometimes she whispered words of reassurance to someone who wasn't there. Tonight, as the banquet preparations continued, Tawanda entered the service corridor and saw Sifa struggling to carry a heavy crate of wine bottles. She was slight, barely in her early 20s, and the weight made her arms shake visibly. Let me help you with that, Tawanda said, stepping forward. Sifa flinched, startled. No, sir, I'm fine. I can manage. You look like you're about to collapse, he insisted gently. I must finish on time, she said quietly. Madam is watching everything. Tawanda sighed as she hurried past him, her steps slightly uneven. He wanted to say more, to tell her that she shouldn't let Naledi crush her spirit, but he knew those words would only worsen her situation. Across the hallway, Naledi had seen them talking. The way her eyes narrowed could have cut glass. By the time evening descended, guests began arriving in waves of shimmering gowns and tailored suits. Soft classical music drifted across the hall. Conversations about business, charity, and influence blended into a luxurious hum. Naledi welcomed them with her most radiant smile, gliding from group to group like a queen in her palace. Sifa, meanwhile, was tasked with assisting the waitstaff. She kept her head low as she served the champagne, careful not to draw attention. But attention found her anyway, or rather, Naledi dragged it to her. The hostess had been waiting for an opportunity. And the moment Sifa accidentally brushed against her dress while passing through the crowd, Naledi's anger ignited like kerosene on flame. The slap rang out. The room froze. And though no one dared speak, every guest felt a piercing discomfort, a mixture of shock, pity, and disbelief. But Naledi wasn't interested in how the room felt. She was focused on Sifa, waiting for her to break, to beg to fall to her knees. Instead, she whispered those chilling words of forgiveness that cut deeper than any defiance. Now as Sifa stood trembling under 100 stares, Naledi's mind replayed the moment Tawanda had spoken to her earlier. The fury she had felt then surged again, hotter, sharper. In her mind, Sifa was no longer just a maid. She was a threat to her pride, to her marriage, to the perfect image she worked so hard to protect. Across the hall, guests whispered behind raised glasses. Why did she slap the girl like that? That was uncalled for. She looked terrified. Poor child. Their murmurs clawed at Naledi's nerves. Meanwhile, Sifa forced herself to breathe evenly. Her cheeks still stung, but inside something stronger than pain was rising, a quiet resolve she rarely allowed herself to feel. She looked past Naledi for a moment to the far corner of the hall, where her phone sat hidden behind the service station. She had received a message earlier. She knew what it contained, and for the first time she wondered if staying silent had been a mistake. If there was one thing Sifa did well, it was enduring. But tonight it felt like endurance was no longer enough. From across the hall, Tawanda stepped forward. Naledi, he said slowly, voice heavy with warning that was unnecessary. Naledi turned sharply. Stay out of this, Tawanda. But for the first time in a long while, he didn't obey her command immediately. His eyes lingered on Sifa, who now stood straighter still, holding the tray with shaking hands. Sifa, he said gently, are you hurt? Naledi's lips tightened. She's fine. She needs to get back to work. Sifa opened her mouth, hesitating. She wasn't sure whether to speak or stay silent like she always had. Her heart thudded violently in her chest. The weight of the truth she carried pressed against her ribs. Not yet, she told herself. Not now. But she knew the moment was coming. The banquet resumed awkwardly. Conversations were forced laughter, sounded strained, and Naledi tried desperately to restore her image. But the shift had already happened. Guests stole glances at Sifa. Some with sympathy, some with curiosity, some with suspicion of Naledi. Hours later, when the evening wound down, Sifa slipped quietly to the staff quarters, clutching her phone to her chest. She read the message again. 4 words that confirmed her worst fear. Her little brother back home had taken a turn for the worse. Her breath trembled. She sank onto the edge of her bed and whispered, "Please hold on, Kiddo. Just a little longer." Her phone buzzed again, this time a different message. One she hadn't expected. It was from a guest who had attended the banquet, and what they revealed would change everything. Sifa stared at the glowing message on her phone, her heartbeat thudding loudly in her ears. The sender was someone she barely spoke to, Mrs. Rudo Chulu, one of the most respected philanthropists at the banquet. She was known for her gentle voice, her calm posture, and her ability to read people like an open book. Sifa had only served her wine once that night, yet somehow the woman had noticed everything. The message read, "My dear, I saw your face after the slap. If you ever need help or need to speak privately, come to the Chulu Foundation office tomorrow morning. I believe you know something you're afraid to say." Sifa's breath caught. How could this woman possibly sense it? She shut off the screen quickly. She could not afford hope, not when Kiddo's health was failing, not when her job was the only income they had. The Moal estate was her lifeline, and Naledi would destroy her if she ever suspected Sifa had spoken to anyone about what she knew. She lay down fully clothed, staring blankly at the ceiling. The room she shared with 2 other maids was quiet tonight. They were still working late to clean up after the banquet. For the first time, Sifa wished they were here just so she didn't feel so alone with her thoughts. As the minutes passed, her mind kept returning to the truth she had buried deep, the truth she never intended to reveal. 3 weeks earlier, she had overheard Naledi in the guest lounge, speaking in a trembling whisper on the phone. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had only come to wipe the tables after a meeting. But when she heard Naledi's voice, agitated, angry, she froze behind the half-closed door. "I said transfer it under the foundation's name." "No, not our foundation. Use the new account." "Yes, the one under the Charity Expansion Project." "No, Tawanda doesn't need to know. He thinks we're raising funds for scholarships." Sifa remembered how the woman on the other end responded. She couldn't hear the words, but she heard the laughter. Cold, mocking. Naledi hissed, "Just finish it. If anything goes wrong, it'll fall on the staff. They sign everything anyway." Sifa's breath had caught in her throat when she heard her own name spoken, and if someone has to take the blame, I'll say the maid mishandled the documents. That one, Sifa. She's quiet, no one would question it. That night, Sifa had run back to the servants' quarters and cried until her eyes were swollen. She didn't want trouble. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted to work hard, send money home, and keep her little brother alive. But she knew one thing for sure. If Naledi ever got caught, she would not hesitate to throw Sifa under the bus. Now, after the public slap, that fear felt even more real. Naledi had crossed a line, one that made Sifa question why she was still protecting her silence. Morning arrived harshly. Sifa had barely slept when a knock sounded at the door. It was Miriam, an older maid with tired eyes but a motherly warmth. Sifa, get up. Madame Naledi wants you in the main house. Now. Sifa's stomach twisted. She dressed quickly, tied her hair neatly, and followed Miriam through the corridor. What happened? She whispered. Miriam sighed. She's angry, child. Angry like I've never seen. Be careful with your words. When Sifa stepped into the sitting room, Naledi was pacing like a predator in a cage. Her makeup from the night before was replaced by a fresh, flawless look, yet the fury underneath ruined the illusion. There you are, Naledi spat. You embarrassed me last night. Sifa lowered her eyes. I apologize, madam. Naledi stepped closer, heels clacking sharply on the marble. Your apology means nothing. Do you know how many people were watching? Do you know what you made me look like? Sifa didn't respond. She knew there was no correct answer. You were supposed to stay invisible, Naledi hissed. But no, you had to make a scene. That pathetic little whisper of yours, you slapped the wrong person. What did you mean by that? Sifa froze. She hadn't expected Naledi to repeat the words back to her like that. And behind her fury, there was fear. Naledi wanted to know what Sifa knew. I meant nothing, madam, Sifa replied softly. It was only something I said without thinking. Naledi laughed sharply. You think I'm stupid? Just then footsteps echoed toward them. Tawanda entered the room, his expression serious. Naledi, he said, why are you interrogating her like a criminal? She caused humiliation. You slapped her in front of guests, Tawanda cut in. The humiliation came from you. Naledi's jaw tightened. Are you defending her? I'm asking you to behave reasonably, he replied. Sifa wished she could disappear. She did not want to be the cause of an argument between a husband and wife. But before she could excuse herself, Tawanda spoke again, this time turning to her. Sifa, if my wife mistreats you or if she's done anything else inappropriate, you can tell me. Naledi stiffened, fear flickering in her eyes. Say one word, Naledi whispered dangerously at Sifa, and all enough Tawanda snapped. You will not threaten her. The tension in the room was so thick that it felt hard to breathe. Sifa looked down at her trembling hands. She wanted to protect herself, protect her brother, protect the job she desperately needed. But she also knew that secrets like Naledi's could explode without warning, and she would be the one burned. I'm fine, sir, she whispered. Madam has been strict, but it is her right. I am only a maid. Tawanda stared at her, searching her face. Naledi smirked triumphantly, believing she had won. Sifa quickly excused herself and fled to the garden. She needed air. She needed space. She needed clarity. But clarity was the last thing she found. As she rounded the corner, she nearly collided with Mrs. Rudo Chulu, the guest who had messaged her. The older woman looked at her with kind, perceptive eyes. Child, Mrs. Chulu said softly, you look like you are carrying a mountain. Sifa swallowed hard. Madam, I'm sorry. I didn't reply to your message. That's all right, Mrs. Chulu interrupted gently. I knew you wouldn't. Not last night. But I also knew that if the truth in your eyes was as heavy as I thought, I would need to come here myself. Sifa's throat tightened. Tears threatened to spill. But listen to me carefully, Mrs. Chulu continued. I didn't come to force you into anything. I came to warn you. Sifa blinked. Warn me, Mrs. Chulu nodded gravely. Naledi is planning something. Several guests overheard her speaking to one of the event managers after the banquet. She mentioned you by name. She sounded desperate. Sifa's heart hammered painfully. What? What did she say? That she needs to meet her associate today. That documents need to be altered. And that if anything goes wrong, you will be the one blamed. Sifa's breath vanished. Mrs. Chulu placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You are in danger, child, and staying silent won't protect you. Those words struck like a bolt of lightning, because deep down, Sifa already knew they were true. She just didn't know how to save herself or her brother. But she sensed that the moment she had feared was coming sooner than she expected. Sifa stood frozen in the garden, her fingers gripping the hem of her apron so tightly the fabric almost tore. Mrs. Rudo Chulu's words echoed like thunder inside her mind. You are in danger. Staying silent won't protect you. Danger. She had always sensed that working under Naledi Mwali was like walking on cracked glass, but she had never imagined something so dark, so deliberate was unfolding behind the scenes. Mrs. Chulu watched her closely, her eyes soft but serious. My dear, you must think carefully about your next steps. Whatever Naledi is involved in, she is desperate now. Desperate people become unpredictable. Sifa swallowed hard. But if I speak, she'll destroy me. And my brother, he depends on me. And if you stay quiet, Mrs. Chulu replied gently, she will destroy you anyway, when it suits her. A cold wind brushed past them, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. Sifa felt a shiver crawl across her skin. The Mwali state, usually so polished and magnificent, suddenly felt suffocating like a beautiful cage made of lies. Mrs. Chulu took a step closer. Let me help you. Not because I pity you, but because I can tell you have a good heart. And because someone like you doesn't deserve to be ruined by a woman who weaponizes her wealth. Sifa lowered her gaze, overwhelmed. No one, not a single soul, had ever stood up for her like this. Not since her mother passed. Not since she had taken the responsibility of raising her little brother alone. I don't know what to do, Sifa whispered. You don't have to decide now, Mrs. Chulu replied. But be careful, watch her. See what she plans. And if she targets you again, you come directly to me. Sifa nodded slowly. Mrs. Chulu gave her hand a gentle squeeze before turning to leave. As the philanthropist walked away, Sifa stood in silence, heart pounding. She wanted to cry, to scream, to run, but instead she returned to work, because that was what she knew how to do, endure. Inside the estate, Tawanda Mwale sat in his study staring blankly at a document he could no longer focus on. The slap from last night replayed over and over in his mind, not the sound of it, but the look in Sifa's eyes when she lifted her head. The mixture of pain, dignity, and something else, something that made his chest tighten. Was it fear, or was it resignation? He rubbed his temple. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and he could feel it in his bones. Naledi entered the study without knocking, shoulders, stiff lips pursed. Tawanda, we need to talk, she announced. He sighed heavily. What now, Naledi? You embarrass me in front of the girl, she snapped. In our own house? In our house, he repeated calmly. I will not allow cruelty. Nonsense, Naledi threw her hands up. She deserved discipline. She's incompetent, careless, disrespectful. She's a maid, Tawanda said, voice low. Not your enemy. Naledi scoffed, crossing her arms. She was used to winning every argument, but today she sensed something different in her husband. A firmness, a clarity. One she didn't like. Why are you suddenly defending her? Naledi demanded. Have you forgotten your place as my husband? Tawanda's eyes narrowed. My place. Naledi instantly regretted her words but refused to apologize. Pride was her armor and her prison. She's manipulating you, Naledi continued quickly. Don't you see? She's trying to get your sympathy. That's how girls like her operate. You don't know anything about her, Tawanda replied sharply. Naledi clenched her jaw. He had never used that tone with her before. A troubling possibility crept into her mind. Had Sifa already begun talking? Had someone seen something? Her voice hardened. We're discussing this later. I have a meeting. With who? Tawanda asked too casually. A business associate, she said. Nothing important. She left before he could probe further. But Tawanda's suspicion grew like wildfire. Something in the way she avoided eye contact, the tension in her shoulders, the fear she tried to conceal beneath anger. He had underestimated the depth of her secrets. Meanwhile, Sifa was washing linens behind the estate when Miriam approached her. The older maid's face was lined with worry. Child, what is troubling you? You look as if death is standing behind you. Sifa forced a tiny smile. I'm just tired. But Miriam didn't believe her. She sat down beside Sifa, her voice soft. I heard Madam speaking to someone this morning, Miriam said. She mentioned your name. And she sounded frightened. Sifa stiffened. Frightened. Yes. As if she's losing control of something. She kept saying she has to fix it before it blows up. A chill curled around Sifa's spine. But there's more, Miriam whispered, glancing around before continuing. She asked Mr. Doob, the driver, to take her to a location outside the city. A warehouse. Warehouse. Documents. Blame. The puzzle pieces clicked together. Naledi wasn't just hiding something. She was moving quickly to bury anything that could expose her. And Sifa suddenly understood. If Naledi destroyed the evidence first, the only person left to blame would be her. She inhaled sharply. Miriam, please, if anything happens, look after my belongings. Miriam grabbed her wrist. Child, don't say such things. But Sifa's eyes were distant. She knew what she had to do next. She had to see the warehouse. She had to know what Naledi planned. She had to protect herself and her brother before it was too late. At noon, Naledi left the mansion in a fury, slamming her car door as she drove away. Sifa watched from the garden shed, heart racing. She slipped out quietly, changed into her plain spare dress, and called a motorcycle taxi from her small savings. She followed Naledi's car from a distance down the hill, past the markets across the rusted Makonda Bridge, until they reached the industrial outskirts. The warehouse looked abandoned, windows cracked, walls peeling. But Naledi walked inside like she owned the place. Sifa hid behind a stack of crates near the entrance, listening as Naledi met with two men in suits. Everything must be moved today, Naledi ordered. Burn what can be burned, replace what can be replaced. And this, she held up a thick folder, put it in the maid's locker. Make sure her fingerprints are on it. Sifa's blood went cold. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Madam framing an employee. Do as I said, Naledi snapped. If this scandal breaks, I won't go down alone. Sifa's knees weakened. Her lungs refused to fill. She clutched her chest to keep from collapsing. She wasn't imagining the danger. She wasn't overthinking. Naledi truly intended to destroy her. For a moment, Sifa nearly fled. But a sudden strength rose within her. She pulled out her phone, and she hit record. Naledi's voice echoed clearly. And if anything goes wrong, that stupid girl Sifa will take the fall. A fire lit behind Sifa's eyes. She finally understood. If she didn't save herself, no one else could. And today, Naledi had given her the weapon she needed. Sifa crouched, lower her back, pressed against the cold metal crate as the recording continued to capture every venomous word that spilled from Naledi's lips. Her hands trembled so hard she feared she might drop the phone. She bit down on her lower lip to silence her own breathing. Sweat trickled down her neck despite the cool air seeping through the cracks of the abandoned warehouse. Naledi's voice was sharp, urgent. The voice of someone fighting to stay afloat in secrets thicker than mud. We don't have time, she snapped at the two men. If the Chulu Foundation starts digging, I'm finished. That woman suspects something. Mrs. Chulu, one man asked uneasily. Yes, Naledi hissed. She saw that girl last night, the maid, and she's putting pieces together. We have to destroy the evidence before she gets the chance to question anyone. Sifa's heart twisted painfully. Mrs. Chulu had been right. Naledi was desperate. And desperation made her dangerous. One of the men shifted uncomfortably. Madam, with all due respect, dragging the maid into this. I told you, Naledi interrupted, voice icy. She's perfect for it. No family here, no influence, no one to defend her. If authorities investigate, she'll be an easy scapegoat. Sifa covered her mouth to smother the gasp threatening to escape. And if she refuses to cooperate, the second man asked. Naledi laughed softly, a cold, horrible sound. She won't refuse. She's timid. She trembles when I walk by. She won't dare deny anything I accuse her of. That girl is useful as long as she stays frightened. Shock pulsed through Sifa like lightning. Naledi didn't simply see her as a maid. She saw her as disposable. A tool. A shield. A sacrifice. But not today. Not anymore. The men walked deeper into the warehouse, discussing how to clean up the documents. Naledi followed, heels echoing sharply. Sifa waited until their voices faded before slipping silently out from behind the crates. She darted toward a row of rusted shelves near the wall. Every sound felt amplified, the scrape of her shoe on gravel, the pounding of her pulse, even the faint buzz of a flickering overhead bulb. She kept her head low and eyes sharp. She needed to get out. She needed to get this recording to someone who could actually help her. She needed to save Keto. Most importantly, she needed to get home alive. When she reached the back door of the warehouse, she paused. The lock was broken, swinging loosely. She slipped outside the sunlight, stabbing her eyes after the dim interior. Dust swirled in lazy spirals as the wind whispered across the barren lot. Her phone buzzed. She nearly dropped it in shock before fumbling to read the screen. Keto's caretaker, he's asking for you. Please come soon. He's weak today. Sifa felt her throat tighten painfully. Keto, please hold on, she whispered. She wiped her eyes quickly. She had no time to break down. She ran to the side of the road where her motorcycle taxi driver waited, playing a game on his phone. Let's go, she said breathlessly. To the estate, he asked. No. Chulu Foundation. His eyebrows rose, but he nodded. As they sped away, dust and exhaust trailing behind them, Sifa clutched her phone like it was the last lifeline she had. And in many ways it was. Back at the Mwali estate, Naledi stormed into the foyer, tossing her purse onto a velvet chair. She was still fuming from the warehouse meeting, though she felt better knowing she had forced the men into action. She believed she was finally ahead of the danger, but she didn't know that danger was already slipping through her fingers. Tawanda stepped out from the hallway, watching her coldly. He had been waiting for her. "Where were you?" he asked. Naledi flipped her hair dismissively. "I had business." "What kind of business requires a warehouse?" he asked, stepping closer. Naledi froze for half a heartbeat. It was only a flicker, but Tawanda caught it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said tightly. "Don't lie to me," Tawanda said. "I've given you time. I've ignored your temper. I've tried to believe you're still the woman I married. But something is wrong and you're dragging innocent people into it." Innocent? Naledi scoffed. "You mean her?" "Yes," Tawanda answered firmly. "Her." Naledi clenched her jaw so hard it ached. "She's not as innocent as she looks. You'd be surprised what girls like that are capable of. Girls like what," he challenged. "Poor hardworking scared. What exactly is her crime, Naledi?" Naledi opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tawanda's eyes narrowed. He had seen enough. "We are talking tonight," he said, "and you will tell me the truth." Naledi turned away, her expression twisting. She needed to regain control before everything fell apart. Meanwhile, Sifa arrived outside the Chulu Foundation that afternoon. The building stood tall, painted in calming shades of blue and white. Inside, the reception area smelled faintly of lavender. Mrs. Rudo Chulu emerged from a corridor the moment Sifa walked in, as if she had been waiting. "You came," she said with gentle relief. "I'm glad." Sifa's voice trembled. "Madam, Naledi is planning something terrible." Mrs. Chulu guided her into a private office and locked the door behind them. "Sit, child. Start from the beginning." Sifa recounted everything, the phone call she overheard weeks ago, the threats, the documents, and finally the warehouse visit. When she played the recording, Mrs. Chulu's expression hardened with every word. When it ended, the woman leaned back, hands folded, eyes sharp with purpose. "This," she said, "is serious, very serious, and dangerous." Sifa nodded, unable to stop the tears now pooling in her eyes. "She wants to blame me. She wants to ruin me." Mrs. Chulu reached across the table and took her hand kindly. "Not if we act first," Sifa whispered. "We take this to the board, to the investigative department, to people who won't be silenced by her husband's wealth or her connections." "Her husband doesn't know," Sifa said. "He tried to defend me." Mrs. Chulu paused. "Then he deserves to know the truth." Sifa's breath shook. "Madam Chulu, if I do this, I'll be fired. And my brother, he's very sick." Mrs. Chulu's face softened. "What is his condition?" "He's 12, and his lungs. He needs treatment I can't afford." Mrs. Chulu squeezed her hand. "You're not alone anymore. I will ensure your brother gets help, I promise you that." Sifa broke. A choked sob escaped her, and she covered her mouth, overwhelmed by the weight of everything. Mrs. Chulu rose and placed a comforting arm around her shoulders. "Now listen carefully," she said. "You are braver than you know, but we must be strategic." Sifa wiped her tears. "What do we do?" "We expose Naledi," Mrs. Chulu said. "But not just to authorities, to her husband, to her guests, to everyone she hides behind her mask." Sifa stared in shock. "Tonight," Mrs. Chulu nodded. "Tonight." Sifa's heart pounded with a mixture of terror and hope. For the first time, she was no longer the quiet maid who simply endured. She was someone holding the truth. And the truth was powerful enough to shatter the world Naledi had built. The sun dipped behind the Mwala estate like a flaming coin, sinking into water, leaving behind a slow-burning twilight that stretched long shadows across the marble driveway. The evening breeze carried the faint scent of jacaranda blossoms, a strange contrast to the storm brewing beneath the elegant roof tiles. Inside the mansion, the staff rushed about preparing for another social gathering. Naledi had organized a small follow-up dinner with select guests, people whose opinions mattered most to her image. She planned to charm them, distract them, regain control of the narrative after the humiliating slap that had rippled through the community. But she didn't know that tonight's gathering would be her undoing. As Sifa rode back toward the estate with Mrs. Rudo Chulu in the back seat of her sleek black car, she kept fidgeting with her fingers, the skin around her nails reddened from nervous scratching. "Child," Mrs. Chulu said gently, "we must do this calmly and smartly. Panic will only give her more power. Sifa nodded, but her voice trembled. Madam, I'm afraid. She has influence. And if she sees me walk into the house with you, she won't, Mrs. Chulu assured her with a soothing firmness. You'll enter through the service gate. I will enter through the front. When it is time for your part, I'll signal you. Sifa inhaled shakily. What if she tries to twist the story? Mrs. Chulu gave her a knowing smile. My dear, she can twist all she wants. But the truth does not bend. And tonight it is on your side. Sifa pressed a hand over her chest to steady her pounding heartbeat. For years, she had been invisible, just a shadow moving through Naledi's hallways. But tonight she would step into the light whether she was ready or not. The car slowed as they approached the estate's gates. They parted automatically, servants bowing slightly as they recognized the philanthropist. But none noticed Sifa slipping out into the dark, moving silently toward the back entrance. Inside the mansion, Naledi stood before her mirror, touching up her red lipstick. She had chosen an emerald gown, one that glittered under the chandelier like the skin of a serpent. Her reflection was breathtaking, but behind the beauty danced a feverish desperation. She spoke to herself in the mirror. You will not lose. You will not fall. You built this life. You deserve this life. But her hands trembled. She shook them out sharply. A knock sounded on the door. She straightened. Enter. Miriam stepped inside cautiously. Madam, your guests are arriving. Good. Naledi smoothed her dress, regaining composure. Where is that girl Sifa? Miriam lowered her gaze. She went to town for supplies earlier. She hasn't returned yet. Naledi's eyes narrowed. Without permission, Miriam hesitated. She didn't say. A cold anger tightened Naledi's chest. Find her. Now. I want her here before the guests sit down. Miriam bowed quickly and hurried out, though she knew very well where Sifa was. She had seen her slip through the back gate. Miriam whispered a prayer under her breath. She didn't know what Sifa planned, but she sensed something monumental was coming. Meanwhile, Tawanda dressed in his room with a heaviness he couldn't shake. He wasn't the kind of man who feared social events, but tonight felt wrong. His instincts buzzed like electricity under his skin. When he joined the gathering, the guests greeted him warmly. They chatted about business, charity projects, and gossip from last night's banquet, but many of their eyes flickered with unspoken questions regarding the slap. Tawanda noticed every glance, every uneasy smile, every forced compliment. And he felt shame coil in his stomach, not for himself but for Sifa. He needed answers, and he intended to get them. In the service corridor, Sifa clutched her phone tightly and waited for Mrs. Chulu's signal. Her back pressed against the wall, her breath shallow, her eyes darting at every sound. She checked her brother's messages again. He's sleeping now, but he looks pale today, the caretaker had written earlier. A fear deeper than any danger from Naledi clutched her heart. I'm doing this for you, Kido, she whispered. For us. Her phone vibrated. It was Mrs. Chulu. A single message. It's time. Sifa swallowed hard and moved toward the main hall. The dinner had begun. 12 guests sat around Naledi's pristine dining table, the crystal gleaming, the silverware shining like small daggers in the candlelight. Naledi stood at the head, smiling flawlessly. My dear friends, she began, lifting her glass. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I wanted us to gather again to share warmth, laughter, and clarity. The last word lingered strangely. Mrs. Chulu entered at that exact moment. Naledi's smile faltered. Rudo, I didn't know you were joining us. Oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world, Mrs. Chulu replied smoothly. She took her seat at the far end of the table, directly across from Tawanda. Naledi cleared her throat. As I was saying, but Mrs. Chulu rose slowly. Before dinner begins, I believe the household would benefit from a bit of truth. Naledi froze, her fingers tightened around her glass. Rudo, this is absolutely necessary, Mrs. Chulu interjected, her voice cool and commanding. The room went silent. Tawanda looked sharply at his wife, then at Mrs. Chulu. Something was about to break wide open. Mrs. Chulu turned toward the doorway. Child, please come in. Sifa stepped forward. Gasps echoed across the table. Naledi's face drained of color. You, Naledi hissed. What are you doing here? You belong in the kitchen. Enough, Mrs. Chulu cut in firmly. Let the girl speak. Tawanda stood halfway from his chair, staring at Sifa with concern. Sifa, are you all right? Sifa nodded weakly, but her voice carried strength she didn't know she had. Sir, everyone, something has been happening. Something I didn't want to cause trouble with. But Madame Chulu said the truth must be spoken today. Naledi slammed her fist onto the table. Don't listen to her. She's unstable. She ran away today. She has no credibility. Mrs. Chulu lifted a hand silencing her. Play the recording. The room stilled as Sifa pressed play. Naletti's own voice filled the elegant dining hall. And if anything goes wrong, that stupid girl Sifa will take the fall. Silence followed. A heavy, unforgiving silence. Naletti's face turned white, then red, then white again. No, that is taken out of context. Another part of the recording played burn what can be burned, replace what can be replaced. And this put it in the maid's locker. Make sure her fingerprints are on it. The guests recoiled in horror. Tawanda felt his entire world shatter. Sifa's hands trembled as she clutched the phone, tears slipping down her cheeks, but she did not look away. Naledi lunged forward. You little witch, you did this. Tawanda grabbed her wrist midair. Enough. Naledi stared at him, eyes wild. She's lying. She's manipulating you. Tawanda's voice thundered through the hall. Your voice is on that recording, Naledi. You planned to ruin an innocent girl. You planned fraud, and you lied to everyone in this room. Naledi staggered back. No, Tawanda. I did it for us. For us, he repeated, voice sharp as a blade. Or for yourself. For the first time, Naledi's mask slipped completely. Her pupils shrank, her lips trembled. She looked like a child watching a tower collapse onto itself. Mrs. Chulu stood. I've already contacted the board. And the authorities, Naledi screamed. You have no right. I have every right, Mrs. Chulu replied. You misused charity funds. You tried to frame a young woman with no protection. And you abused your power in the ugliest way. The guests rose from their seats horrified. Tawanda turned to Sifa. I am so sorry. I should have protected you. Sifa sobbed softly. I just wanted to save my brother, sir. I never meant for this to happen. Mrs. Chulu gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Child, you saved yourself. And sometimes that is the bravest thing a person can do. Naledi clutched the edge of the table, breath ragged, staring at the faces around her. Faces that once adored her, now filled with disgust. And she realized the truth. Her empire had fallen. And she had built the collapse with her own hands. Tonight was supposed to restore her reputation. Instead, it exposed her completely. And as security officers stepped into the hall summoned by Mrs. Chulu earlier, Naledi Mawale finally understood there was no escape left. The moment Naledi saw the security officers step into the grand dining hall, her eyes widened with a mixture of fury and disbelief. The glittering room that once shimmered with admiration for her now seemed to close in like a trap. Her breathing turned sharp, uneven. Guests shifted back instinctively, as though her downfall were contagious. Don't touch me, Naledi shrieked when the first officer approached. Do you know who I am? My husband will fix this. Tawanda, tell them. Tell them to stand down. But Tawanda remained still. His face, usually calm, controlled, was carved with disappointment, so deep it looked like a wound. Naledi, he said quietly, I cannot protect what you have done. Naledi's lips trembled. She searched every face around the table for anyone willing to defend her. But the polished, important guests she so carefully curated only stared at her with concealed revulsion. Their silence was harsher than any insult. The officers stepped forward again. Naledi stumbled back, grabbing the edge of the dining table for balance. Her heel slipped, and she nearly fell before a guard caught her arm, not gently. Let go of me, she snarled, jerking away. Madam, the officer said firmly, you are being detained for questioning regarding mismanagement of charity funds, falsification of documents, and attempted coercion of an employee. Naledi gave a wild laugh. Coercion? That girl is lying. You, she jabbed a shaking finger towards Sifa. You set me up. You ungrateful little parasite, the room gasped. Sifa dropped her gaze, tears threatening again, not from fear, but from the cruelty in Naledi's voice. Tawanda stepped in front of Sifa protectively. Do not speak to her again, he warned his wife. You've hurt that girl enough. Naledi froze at those words, and for the first time she understood the truth. Not one person in this room was on her side. She let out a strangled sound, half sob, half snarl, then attempted to bolt toward the hallway. But the officers were faster. They blocked her path, securing her wrists in cuffs as she writhed helplessly. Don't do this, Naledi cried. Please, I can fix it. I can explain Tawanda, do something. I'm your wife. Tawanda closed his eyes, a shadow of grief crossing his face. You stopped being the woman I married a long time ago. That sentence broke Naledi more thoroughly than the cuffs around her wrists. Her knees buckled, and the officers had to hold her upright as they led her away. Her green dress trailed behind her, no longer shimmering, only dragging like a fallen crown through the polished marble floor. The moment the front doors closed behind Naledi and the officers, an intense silence fell over the dining hall. Some guests whispered, but most simply stared, shaken. Tawanda remained frozen for a long moment, shoulders, heavy eyes haunted. This was never her burden alone, he finally said, voice low. I should have seen it sooner. Mrs. Chulu rose, walking around the table toward him. You will have to decide what comes next for your family. But tonight do not blame yourself for the sins of another. Tawanda's gaze shifted to Sifa. She had stepped back to the corner of the room, hands clasped tightly against her apron, trying to make herself as small as possible. She couldn't look anyone in the eye, not after so many months of silence, not after what had just happened. Tawanda walked toward her slowly. Sifa, he said gently. She flinched slightly before meeting his gaze. Her eyes glistened with exhaustion. You saved many people tonight, he told her. More than you realize. She shook her head. I didn't save anyone, sir. I only tried to protect myself. And that Mrs. Chulu interjected from behind is exactly what bravery looks like when the world is stacked against you. But Sifa wasn't convinced. Her brother's pale face flashed in her mind. Her mother's last words echoed, take care of Keto. Sir, she said, voice strained, I understand if you need me to leave the estate. I caused trouble. I ruined your evening. I exposed your wife in front of your guests. Tawanda lifted a hand. Stop. Do not apologize for the truth. Sifa swallowed hard. But I don't want to be a burden. Mrs. Chulu placed a hand on her back. Child, the only burden here was the woman who chose deceit over kindness. Several guests murmured agreement, but Sifa still trembled. She had spent so long shrinking herself to survive that standing tall now felt terrifying. Tawanda softened his tone. You should rest tonight. Tomorrow we will discuss how to move forward. But one thing I promise, you will not be punished for speaking the truth. Sifa bowed her head. Thank you, sir. Later, when the guests dispersed and the mansion grew quiet, Sifa returned to the staff quarters. The corridor felt heavier tonight. Every familiar corner suddenly carried memories of Naledi's voice, echoing through it, sharp orders, cold reprimands, and humiliating blows hidden behind closed doors. Miriam, who had waited anxiously outside the door, immediately pulled her into a hug. Child, she cried. What happened? We heard shouting, then officers, then madam being dragged out. Sifa shook, finally letting tears fall. Miriam, it's over. She tried to frame me. She was stealing from the charity. And tonight, everyone found out. Miriam clutched her chest. Oh, praise the heavens, I knew that woman had rot in her soul. Oh, Sifa, you brave child. We were all afraid. We all saw what she did, but none of us dared speak. I was afraid too, Sifa whispered. And yet you spoke anyway, Miriam replied, cupping her cheek. That makes you stronger than any of us. They held each other for a long moment, the tension of months finally collapsing. When Sifa pulled away, she wiped her eyes. I need to call Keto, she dialed instantly. The caretaker answered. He's awake now. Weak, but he smiled when I told him you'd call. Sifa's heart squeezed with love and pain. Can I talk to him? A moment later, Keto's faint voice came through the line. Sifa. His tiny whisper nearly broke her. I'm here, Keto. Are you coming home? He asked. Sifa closed her eyes, tears streaming again. Soon. I promise I'll be with you soon. Okay. I love you. I love you too, she whispered. More than anything, when the call ended, she sat on her bed staring at the dark window. She had exposed Naledi. She had saved herself. But her fight was far from over. Tomorrow the consequences would unfold. Naledi might try to fight back legally. The estate would be full of investigators. Reporters might swarm. Tawanda's life would change. The staff's dynamic would shift. And her brother still needed help. A quiet knock broke her thoughts. When she opened the door, she found Tawanda standing there. She gasped, bowing immediately. Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't expect Sifa, he said warmly. May I speak with you? She nodded and stepped aside. Tawanda entered, looking around the modest room with sadness. You've lived like this for months, she nodded. It is more than I had before. He sighed. You deserve far better. He sat down on the edge of a chair. I spoke with Mrs. Chulu. She told me about your brother. Sifa stiffened. Sir, don't worry, he assured her. You didn't ask her for anything, but she believes I should know. Sifa lowered her gaze, ashamed. I didn't mean to burden. You're not a burden, he repeated firmly. Your situation is not a shame. It is a responsibility you've carried with more grace than many people with wealth ever could. Her throat tightened. I'm going to help him, Tawanda continued. Your brother will get the treatment he needs. I'll arrange everything. Sifa's breath hitched. Sir, I can't accept. You can, he said softly. And you will. This is not charity. This is justice. Her tears fell freely. For the first time, not from fear, but from relief. You're safe now, Sifa, Tawanda said gently. And tomorrow we start rebuilding not just this household, but your life. She covered her mouth, sobbing softly, because for the first time in years, she believed him. For the first time, she felt hope. And for the first time, the Mwal estate didn't feel like a place she needed to escape. It felt like a place where her voice finally mattered. Morning crept into the Mwal estate slowly, as though even the sun hesitated to touch a house that had shattered the night before. The hallways were unusually quiet. Staff whispered instead of speaking, moved lightly instead of walking. Everyone felt the shift like the estate itself was holding its breath. Sifa awoke before dawn, though she had barely slept. Her eyes were swollen, her mind heavy, yet her spirit felt strangely steady. For the first time in months, she didn't wake up, terrified of Naliti's footsteps echoing through the corridors. The oppressive fear that once clung to her ribs like a vine had loosened. But what replaced it was something else, a weight of uncertainty, and the question of what her future now held. She dressed neatly, tied her headscarf, and stepped outside. The early light painted the garden gold. Birds hopped along the hedges as if unaware of the chaos that had erupted hours earlier. She needed air before facing whatever awaited her next. As she stepped onto the stone path, she noticed someone already sitting on one of the benches by the fountain, Tawanda. She froze. She hadn't expected to see him this early. He looked up the moment he sensed movement, offering a tired but sincere smile. Good morning, Sifa. She bowed quickly. Good morning, sir. Please, he said gently. You don't have to do that anymore. She straightened slowly, unsure how to respond. Tawanda stood, hands clasped behind his back. His posture carried the heaviness of a man who had spent the entire night replaying every moment of the past months and every mistake he had made. I was hoping to speak with you, he said. Walk with me, Sifa hesitated, then nodded. They walked along the path in silence at first. The fountain's water trickled softly behind them. A breeze rustled the jacaranda leaves overhead. I couldn't sleep much last night, Tawanda began. I kept thinking, how did it get this bad without me seeing it? Sifa said nothing. She was my wife, he murmured. I should have known she was hiding something. I should have seen the fear in you. In the staff? He paused, swallowing thickly. I failed the people in my own home. Sifa shook her head quickly. Sir, please, you didn't know. Madame Naleti hid things from everyone. That's what frightens me, he responded quietly. That she was capable of becoming someone I no longer recognized. She glanced up at him. His eyes, usually sharp and commanding, were clouded with sadness. I know this is not your burden to carry, he continued, but I want to ensure you understand something. None of this is your fault. What you did last night, it was brave. It was necessary. And because of you, lives will be changed for the better. Sifa felt her throat tighten. I didn't do it to be brave, sir. I did it because I was afraid. I felt cornered. And yet you still stood up, he said. That is courage, Sifa. They reached the edge of the garden. Tawanda stopped, turning to face her fully. I meant what I said last night, he told her firmly. Your brother will receive treatment. I've already spoken to a doctor at the private clinic. We'll arrange transport for you to visit him. And his bills are covered. Sifa's breath caught. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. He shook his head. You shouldn't have needed my help at all. But I'm glad I can give it. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked away quickly, embarrassed. Sir, she whispered, what will happen to Madam? A heavy silence hung between them. She will be held accountable, Tawanda said finally. The authorities will investigate the funds. If she is guilty, she will face the consequences. Sifa nodded slowly. She felt no joy in Naliti's downfall, only sorrow for a woman who had allowed pride, fear, and greed to swallow her whole. Before either could speak again, Miriam approached briskly from the path. Sir, Miriam panted softly. There are people at the front gate. They say they are from the investigative bureau. Tawanda straightened. Let them in. I'll speak with them in my study. Miriam nodded and hurried away. Tawanda turned back to Sifa. You don't need to be present. This is not your worry anymore. But Sifa shook her head. Sir, I want to be honest. I want to finish what I started. If they ask, I'll speak. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well. I won't force you. He left for the house, and Sifa followed after a moment, heart pounding. The investigative officers gathered in the study, spreading documents across the mahogany desk. They questioned the staff, spoke with Tawanda, and reviewed the recording. Hours passed. Sifa sat quietly outside the door until she was called in. Her palms were sweaty, her breathing shallow. But when she stepped inside and faced the officers, something inside her steadied. She told the truth clearly, calmly, without embellishment. She described overhearing Naletti's call, the threats, the warehouse meeting, everything. Tawanda sat in the corner listening. His expression shifted from sorrow to anger to quiet resolve. When Sifa finished, the lead officer nodded. You've been very brave, Miss Sifa. Your testimony is crucial. He closed his folder. We'll proceed with the case. And you will be protected. Protected? She had never heard that word applied to her before. When the officers left, Tawanda approached her gently. You did well, he said. I'm proud of you. But Sifa didn't feel proud. She felt drained. Sir, she whispered, what will happen to the estate? To the staff, to you, Tawanda exhaled heavily. Everything changes now. I will restructure the foundation, return whatever was taken, and repair the damage she caused to people to trust. Sifa nodded, unsure what her place would be in this new order. As if reading her mind, Tawanda continued, I want you to stay, not as a maid, but in a better role. Something fitting your integrity. We will discuss it later when things settle. Her eyes widened. Sir, I don't think I deserve. You do, he said simply. You absolutely do. Before she could respond, the front doors burst open. Miriam ran in, breathless eyes wide with fear. Sir, Miss Sifa, it's Madame Naletti. Sifa felt her stomach drop. What happened? Tawanda demanded. Miriam's voice trembled. She tried to escape custody. And now, they're bringing her here. The room froze. Into the estate marched two officers, this time not for questioning, but escorting a woman who looked nothing like the glamorous socialite from the night before. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, her dress wrinkled and dirty from fighting. Naledi Mwale. But this Naledi looked broken, unraveled, wild. Her eyes darted around the foyer until they landed on Sifa. You, she whispered hoarsely. You did this to me. Tawanda stepped between them immediately. Don't come near her. Naledi's laugh was hollow, full of madness. Look at you defending her. Look at all of you. Cowards. The officers restrained her firmly. Naledi, Tawanda said quietly, stop this, please. She shook her head violently. No, you don't understand. Everything I did was to protect us. Tawanda's expression twisted with pain. You destroyed us. Naledi's knees buckled and she collapsed against the officers, sobbing in a broken guttural sound. Take her away, the lead officer said softly. As they guided her toward the exit, Naledi looked over her shoulder, tears streaking down her face. This isn't over, she rasped. Truth is never clean. Then she was gone. The estate fell into silence so deep it felt like the walls themselves were grieving. Sifa stood trembling, her breath shaking uncontrollably. The weight of what she had witnessed settled over her like a heavy rain. Tawanda reached out carefully. Sifa, are you all right? She nodded weakly. I will be. But inside she knew. This storm had ended. Yet another one might be waiting just beyond the horizon. The Mwale estate felt strangely hollow after Naledi was taken away, as if her absence pulled an entire layer of sound energy and tension out of the massive house. The staff tiptoed through the hallways, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified about what came next. Even the chandeliers appeared dimmer, their glow softer, as if mourning the spectacle that had unfolded beneath them. Sifa remained rooted in the foyer long after the officer's car disappeared down the driveway. Her mind swirled with images she never wished to remember. Naledi's face contorted in rage, the desperate shrieks the moment she locked eyes with Sifa, eyes that once held arrogance now filled with crumbling madness. She hugged her arms around herself. It wasn't triumph she felt. It wasn't satisfaction. It was a deep, aching sorrow for a life that had spun entirely out of control. Tears are not for her, a soft voice said behind her. Sifa turned. Mrs. Rudo Chulu stood at the entrance, hands folded gracefully, watching her with quiet wisdom. Madam Chulu, Sifa whispered. The older woman stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You are shaken. That is normal. But do not let guilt stay in your heart. Her voice was low, controlled. You did not ruin her child. She chose every step of her downfall long before you entered that mansion. Sifa nodded, though, her chest still tightened painfully. I never wanted things to end this way. I know. Mrs. Chulu's eyes softened. And that is why you will heal. Because you acted from fear, not malice. The ones who harm others without remorse, they are the ones who cannot be saved. Sifa swallowed the lump rising in her throat. Madam, what will happen to her now? Mrs. Chulu sighed. That depends on the investigation. But fraud of this scale is not easily dismissed. She studied Sifa's face. Are you afraid she will return for you? Sifa hesitated. I don't know. She looked lost, dangerous. Mrs. Chulu held her chin gently. Listen to me. You are no longer alone. I will ensure your safety. So will Tawanda. And after what happened, the community will not allow mistreatment or lies to stay buried. A single tear slipped down Sifa's cheek. She wiped it quickly. Thank you, she whispered. Mrs. Chulu smiled. Courage is not loud. It sounds exactly like your voice did last night, quiet, trembling, but unbreakable. As she turned to leave, she placed a small envelope into Sifa's hands. For your brother. Open it later. Sifa stared down at the envelope as Mrs. Chulu walked away, almost glowing with grace. The moment the philanthropist left, Miriam rushed towards Sifa from the corridor, arms opening wide. My child, she cried, cupping Sifa's face. I saw them bringing Madame Naledi back inside. I thought they were bringing her for revenge. Oh, my heart almost stopped. Sifa leaned into the embrace. Miriam smelled like laundry soap and warm comfort. It's over, Miriam, I think. Miriam nodded vigorously. It is over. And you, she tapped Sifa's forehead gently, should be proud. You freed this house from a poisonous shadow. But Sifa didn't feel free. Not yet. Upstairs, Tawanda stood by the window of his private lounge, staring at the long driveway that had swallowed the police car carrying his wife. His reflection on the glass looked older than yesterday, his shoulders heavier, his eyes dimmer. He never imagined his life could unravel this quickly. When he heard footsteps behind him, he turned to find Sifa approaching timidly. Sir, she said softly, Miriam told me you were looking for me. He nodded. Yes, I wanted to speak privately. Sifa's heart raced. Was he angry, regretful? Did he blame her deep down for exposing the truth? She clasped her hands nervously. Tawanda gestured for her to sit. Please. She obeyed, sitting stiffly on the edge of an upholstered chair. He took a deep breath. Sifa, last night I realized something important. He paused. I do not truly know the extent of the suffering you endured in this house. Sifa's throat tightened. Sir, I didn't want to burden you. You were not a burden, he said firmly. You were failed. By me. By everyone who saw and stayed silent. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. He continued. I tried to convince myself that Naledi was simply stressed. Or misunderstood. I chose peace over truth. And because of that, you suffered. Sifa lowered her gaze. Madame Naledi's anger was not your fault. I allowed myself to look away, Tawanda said. And that is as damaging as causing the harm itself. He sank onto the chair across from her, leaning forward. I want to make things right, starting with you. She shifted uneasy. Sir, I don't know what that means. It means, he said quietly, that you will no longer work as a maid here. You will no longer serve under fear or silence. Her eyes widened. Sir, I don't understand. I will place you in a new position, Tawanda said. One with dignity, one that honors your strength. Perhaps in the foundation or administration. Something that will build your future, not steal it. Sifa stared at him, stunned. But sir, I barely finished school. I've only ever cleaned, cooked, taken care of my brother. And yet you exposed a corruption ring, Tawanda replied. You gathered evidence. You faced danger. You held your ground in a room full of powerful people. Do not diminish yourself, Sifa. You have qualities that cannot be taught. Her lips parted slightly, hope and fear swirling in her eyes. I want you to rest today, he continued. Visit your brother. Take comfort. When you return, we will begin a new chapter here. Sifa's tears flowed silently. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Truly. He offered a small, sad smile. Do not thank me yet. There is much to rebuild. She nodded. I'm ready. Later that afternoon, a car arranged by Mrs. Chulu arrived to take Sifa to the clinic where her brother was being treated. The envelope the philanthropist gave her contained money far more than she had ever seen in her life. Enough to cover medications, transport, and more. As the car passed through the estate gates, Sifa stared at the mansion disappearing behind her. She felt a strange mix of relief, fear, and gratitude, like she was walking away from a battlefield that had scarred her deeply. The city streets flew by. Children played soccer barefoot on a dusty field. Old women sold vegetables from wooden stalls. Motorbikes zipped through traffic like electric fish. Life moved on, unaware of Sifa's storm. At the clinic, she almost ran through the hallway. When she opened the door to the small room, Kito's face lit up immediately, even through his exhaustion. Sifa, he wheezed weakly. She rushed to him, pulling him into a tender, careful hug. "Oh, Kito, I'm here now." He coughed, then smiled. "You look different." She laughed softly. "Do I? You look free." Her breath caught. Maybe she was. For the first time in a long, painful stretch of life, she felt the possibility of freedom. Real freedom on the horizon. She held Kito's hand tightly. "Things are changing," she whispered. "I don't know what comes next, but I think it might be something good." He squeezed her hand back, and for a moment, everything felt right. Back at the estate, Tawanda stood in the same spot where he last spoke to Sifa. The breeze fluttered the curtains beside him. Behind him, Mrs. Chulu approached quietly. "You did the right thing," she said. Tawanda didn't turn. "Then why does it still hurt?" "Because betrayal hurts," she replied. "Even when justice is done," he exhaled deeply. "What will she become now without her lies?" "That is her journey, Mrs. Chulu answered. "Not yours." Tawanda nodded slowly. "Focus on rebuilding, Tawanda. Starting with that girl and with yourself." He closed his eyes. "Yes," he whispered, "I will." And somewhere on the road in a small clinic room filled with fading afternoon light, Sifa held her brother's hand and whispered a promise. "We survived the storm, Kito. I won't let anything take us down again." The clinic room was small and dimly lit, but to Sifa, it felt like a sanctuary far removed from the cold marble halls of the Mali estate. She sat beside Kito's bed for hours, stroking his thin arm, whispering stories from their childhood, and promising him a future she prayed she could actually give. He drifted in and out of sleep, breathing shallowly, but each time he opened his eyes, he smiled at her, and that alone gave her strength. Yet as the afternoon deepened, the weight of everything that had happened began pressing down on her chest. The confrontation, Naletti's breakdown, the officers, Tawanda's quiet sorrow. It replayed in her mind like a storm that refused to pass. When a soft knock sounded on the door, Sifa tensed. For a moment, she feared it was bad news. But when the door opened, she saw Miriam step inside with a thermos and 2 cups. Miriam, Sifa whispered in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" the older woman beamed. "Visiting you, child. Do you think I would let you face this alone? I brought tea. Herbal to calm your nerves." Sifa stood and hugged her tightly. For the first time all day, she let her tears flow without restraint. Miriam brushed her cheek. "Shh, it's all right. I'm here now." They sat together by Kito's bedside. Miriam poured tea and handed her a cup. "I was worried about you," Miriam said softly. "The house feels strange without you." "Everyone is uneasy. Mr. Mawale hasn't spoken more than a few words since this morning." Sifa frowned. "Is he angry?" "No," Miriam replied. "Not angry. Just wounded. But not at you." Sifa nodded slowly. She had seen that wound forming in his eyes the night before. He had loved Naledi, or at least the version of her she pretended to be, and that version had shattered in front of him. Miriam glanced at Kito. "How is your brother?" "He's tired," Sifa whispered. "But the doctor said the treatment might work if it starts soon." "It will work," Miriam said firmly, "and you will not face these struggles alone anymore. Even the staff are rallying behind you. They're proud, Sifa." "You gave all of us a voice." Sifa blinked away tears. "I never meant to be a hero." "You didn't have to," Miriam replied. "Sometimes the bravest heroes are those who survive quietly until the day they cannot stay silent anymore." As dusk settled, the clinic lights flickered on, washing the hallway in a pale glow. Miriam eventually returned to the estate, promising to come again the next morning. Sifa stayed by Kito's side until he finally fell into a peaceful sleep. She stepped into the hallway, stretching her stiff limbs. The exhaustion weighed heavily, not just on her body but her spirit. She didn't know what her future would look like, but she knew one thing: she wasn't afraid anymore. Outside the clinic, a car pulled up, a sleek black sedan she recognized instantly. Her breath caught. Tawanda stepped out. She hurried toward him. "Sir, why are you here?" He closed the car door quietly. "To check on your brother. And on you." Sifa flushed. "You didn't need to come." "I did," he said softly. It was the right thing to do. They walked through the quiet hallway together. She guided him into the room. Quito slept soundly, his chest rising and falling gently. Tawanda approached slowly, looking down at the frail boy with deep sadness. "This is what you've been carrying," he murmured. "Alone." Sifa nodded. "I didn't want to drag anyone into it." "You didn't drag anyone," he replied. "We failed to see." His words were gentle, but they pierced deep. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. "The doctors gave me the treatment plan," he said. "I've reviewed it. The clinic is reputable. And I've moved him onto my private coverage. He will get the best care." Sifa gasped. "Sir, no, I can't let you." Tawanda raised a hand. "Sifa, this is not charity. You were wronged. Your brother suffered because you were too frightened to leave a dangerous situation. Allow me to correct some of that." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She covered her mouth to keep from sobbing loudly. "I don't know how to repay you," she whispered shakily. "You don't have to repay me," he said. "Just allow yourself to heal and to build a better life." She wiped her eyes and nodded. They stood quietly beside Quito's bed until the doctor came in and updated them on the evening's progress. When the doctor left, Tawanda glanced at his watch. "I must return to the estate," he said reluctantly. "Investigators will be there all night. They need documents, statements." Sifa nodded silently, but he added gently, "I will send a driver for you tomorrow. Stay as long as you need tonight." She bowed her head. "Thank you, sir." He paused at the doorway, his voice low and sincere. "Rest, Sifa. You've carried too much for too long." When he left, she felt an ache deep in her chest, not painful, but warm. A strange feeling she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Back at the estate, the atmosphere throbbed with tension. Investigators moved through rooms with flashlights and clipboards. Boxes were opened, drawers emptied, ledgers examined. Staff members were questioned one by one. Yet despite the chaos, the mansion felt strangely lighter, like someone had opened a window in a room long sealed. Tawanda oversaw everything from his study, answering questions with a measured calm, but inside his emotions churned like a storm. His wife, his partner, had betrayed not only him but her community, their family name, the foundation they built, and an innocent girl who had never deserved her cruelty. When the officers finally left near midnight, the house fell into uneasy silence. Tawanda walked through the rooms alone, touching the backs of chairs, the railing of the staircase, the portraits lining the walls. They all felt different now. When he reached the dining hall, the same place where Sifa had confronted Naledi, the memory hit him like a blow. He sank into one of the chairs, burying his face in his hands. He wasn't grieving Naledi's arrest. He was grieving the illusion he had clung to for so long. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Sifa curled up on the narrow chair beside her brother's bed, her head resting near his arm. Exhaustion took her quickly, and for the first time in years, her dreams were not filled with fear. When morning light seeped into the room, she woke to the sound of Quito humming softly. She smiled. "You're awake." He nodded. "I feel a little better." Her heart soared. A nurse entered with medication and a warm smile. "Good morning. The doctor says he's responding well so far." Sifa nearly cried again. After helping the nurse, she stepped outside to call Miriam. Miriam answered immediately. "How is he?" "He's better," Sifa whispered, smiling through tears. "The treatment is working." "Oh, thank God," Miriam breathed. "Child, you deserve joy." Sifa wiped her cheek. "How are things at the estate?" Messy Miriam replied. But calmer. The investigators left. They took many documents. And the atmosphere is different now, like the house is breathing again. Sifa inhaled, feeling the truth in the words. "And Mr. Mwale?" she asked tentatively. "He did not sleep," Miriam said. "But he is focused, determined, and he keeps asking about you." Sifa's heart skipped. Before she could reply, she saw a black car pulling into the clinic entrance. "I think she whispered he is here," Miriam gasped. "Then go, child, he needs you too." Sifa hung up. She stood still as the car door opened. Tawanda stepped out holding a small bouquet of white lilies. "For Quito," he said softly. Sifa smiled, trembling, grateful, overwhelmed. "Thank you, sir." He nodded. "May I see him?" "Of course." They walked together toward Quito's room. As they approached, Sifa sensed something shifting gently, quietly, like the first rays of sunrise breaking a long night. Not love, not yet, but understanding, respect. A fragile bond forming between two souls, scarred by the same storm, and perhaps the beginning of something new. Quito's room glowed softly with the late morning light filtering through the curtains when Sifa and Tawanda entered together. The boy looked up from the small puzzle set a nurse had given him. His eyes widened at the sight of the tall, dignified man and the flowers he carried. Tawanda approached slowly, lowering the bouquet beside the bed. "Hello, Kito. I'm Tawanda." Kito blinked shyly. "You're Sifa's boss." Sifa winced. "Kito," but Tawanda smiled gently. "I used to be her boss. But today I'm only a friend who came to check on her little brother." Kito's lips curled into a tiny grin. "They're pretty flowers. They reminded me of your sister Tawanda," said, glancing at Sifa. "Strong, resilient, gentle." Sifa's breath caught. She looked away, cheeks warming with emotion. She didn't quite know how to process. Not admiration, but something deeper, something surprising. Kito fidgeted. "Sifa told me you're helping me get better." Tawanda knelt beside him. "You're helping yourself, young man. We're just making sure you can keep fighting." He paused. "You will grow strong again. I promise." Promises. When was the last time someone had spoken a promise to Kito or to Sifa that didn't feel empty? Kito smiled. "Thank you." Tawanda patted his shoulder. "Rest. You deserve it." When Kito leaned back against his pillows, Sifa stepped quietly into the hallway, with Tawanda following. The moment they closed the door, she sighed deeply. "Sir, I don't know how to repay you. My heart, it's overwhelmed." "You don't need to repay me," he repeated softly. "You deserve help, and your brother deserves life." She swallowed hard. "Everything has changed so fast. I don't know how to process it. I know he said, I feel it too." They walked slowly down the hallway, passing nurses and patients who paid little attention. The world around them hummed in an ordinary rhythm, but inside Sifa everything felt fragile, trembling new. Tawanda finally stopped near a bench by the window. "Sit with me." She did. For a long moment neither spoke. The sunlight warmed their faces, but the silence weighed with truth that needed to be spoken. "Sifa," he began quietly, "I've been thinking about the foundation. And about you." She looked up startled. "About me, yes." He folded his hands. "You don't deserve to spend your life cleaning floors or serving people who don't see your worth." He met her eyes. "You have integrity, courage, and you have something Naledi never had, a heart." Sifa exhaled shakily. Compliments from him felt too generous, too heavy, too unexpected. "I want you to join the Male Foundation's administrative team," he continued. "Training will be provided, salary will be fair, and it will be a job that gives you dignity." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Sir, that is too much." "It is not," he said gently. "It is exactly what you deserve." "But I don't know anything about administration," she whispered. "I've never worked in an office. I've never done." "You will learn," he said firmly, "and I will personally ensure you succeed." Sifa's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head helplessly, overwhelmed. "Sir, I can't believe this. You're giving me a future I never dreamed of." "You gave me truth when I needed it most," he replied softly. "You might not realize it, but you've changed my life too." She froze. "I changed your life." He nodded. "You made me see the rot I was living with, the blindness I allowed." He paused. "Because of you, I found the courage to break from that past." Sifa's heart thudded violently. "Sir, I had no intention. You didn't need one." He smiled sadly. "Sometimes the most transformative people come into our lives without trying, without even knowing." His words lingered between them like a soft wind, stirring something deep inside her, emotion, gratitude, connection. But she shook her head. "Sir, I don't want to cause more trouble. The staff might resent me." "And they won't," he assured her. "They respect you. And I will make it clear you earn this by your honesty, not favoritism." Sifa's heart softened. "Thank you. Truly." Just then a nurse approached. "Miss Sifa, your brother is asking for you." Sifa stood quickly. "I'll go to him." Tawanda rose too. "I'll head back to the estate. The investigators need updates." She nodded. "Please be careful." "Madam Naledi." She looked dangerous. His jaw tightened slightly. "I can handle her, but I appreciate your concern." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Sifa, no matter what happens next, remember, I am on your side." Her eyes shimmered. She whispered, "And I'm grateful for that, sir." He offered one last gentle nod before leaving the clinic. Sifa watched him go, her heart strangely heavy and warm at once. Back at the estate, the investigators were combing through the foundation accounts again. Tawanda met them with composure, but internally each revelation felt like a blade cutting through layers of the life he thought he understood. Naledi had forged signatures, moved funds to offshore accounts, even used Sifa's identity and fabricated paperwork. The betrayal was deeper than he imagined. As he sat with the officers in his late father's office, a room that once embodied honor, he felt grief settle on his shoulders like a cloak. One investigator spoke gently. "Mr. Mwali, none of this reflects on you. Every indication shows you were unaware." Tawanda exhaled. "Ignorance doesn't erase the damage." "No, but your cooperation will help rebuild the foundation's credibility." The officer paused. "And your public stance could help protect your staff." Tawanda nodded. "I will do whatever is necessary." The officer leaned forward. "And about the maid," Sifa Tawanda's pulse tightened. "What about her? She will be called for testimony in the coming days. We want to ensure her safety." Tawanda straightened. "I will protect her. You have my word." The investigator exchanged a subtle look with his colleague, but said nothing. When they left, Tawanda sank into his chair, massaging his temples. Everything was changing. The foundation, the estate, his marriage, his understanding of loyalty. But amid all the destruction, one constant kept surfacing in his mind: Sifa, her voice, her courage, her resilience. He didn't know why, but the more he saw her strength, the more something protective, something unfamiliar stirred inside him. Not love, not yet, but a deep admiration that felt dangerously close to something more. At the clinic, Sifa sat on Kito's bed, feeding him warm porridge. He giggled between bites, his energy slowly returning. "Will I get to live in a big house like the Mwalas?" he asked. Sifa froze. "Maybe one day," she said softly. "If you want." "What about you?" Kito asked. "Do you want to live there?" She hesitated. The Mwala state had once felt like a prison, a place where she was small and silent. But now, it was changing. Tawanda was changing. Her place in that world was changing. She stroked Kito's hair. "I don't know yet," she murmured. As she tucked him into bed later, she pulled out Mrs. Chulu's envelope. Inside was money, but also a handwritten note: "Strength attracts protection. Integrity attracts destiny. Walk boldly into yours." Sifa closed her eyes, feeling those words settle in her soul. Destiny. Could she really have one? Something bigger than servitude, bigger than fear? As she lay back in the chair beside Kito, she whispered, maybe my life is changing for a reason." Outside the clinic window, the sky pulsed with stars, bright, unafraid, unashamed. And somewhere beneath that same sky, Tawanda stood alone in his vast estate, staring at the darkness, thinking of a girl who had taught him, without knowing, that truth was more powerful than wealth. Neither of them understood yet the path forming between them, but fate was already weaving it quietly. The following morning arrived with a gray, muted sky, one that felt neither peaceful nor stormy, but suspended as if waiting for something to unfold. Sifa stepped out of the clinic's entrance just as a soft drizzle began. She hugged her borrowed coat tighter around herself, watching as a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. She knew it immediately. Tawanda had come for her. Her heart thudded gently this time, not from fear, but from the overwhelming reality that her life had shifted into territory she never imagined she would walk. The car door opened, and he stepped out, umbrella in hand. "You didn't have to come yourself," she said quietly as he approached. "Yes," he replied, offering her the umbrella. "I did." The way he said it held weight, something between responsibility and something far more personal. Sifa avoided his gaze as she climbed into the car, her cheeks warming despite the cold air. As the car pulled away, Tawanda asked softly, "How is Kito this morning?" Sifa smiled faintly. "Better. The doctor says his lungs are responding to the medication. He even tried to sit up by himself." "That is wonderful news." She nodded. "It feels like hope is real again." Their eyes met for a moment before she looked away quickly. He didn't push the conversation further. He let silence sit comfortably between them, something she wasn't used to but appreciated deeply. When they arrived at the Mwala estate, Sifa felt a strange heaviness in her chest. This place had once been an endless maze of fear. Now it felt unfamiliar, emptier, quieter, changed. The gatekeepers bowed respectfully when Sifa stepped out of the car. She stiffened, not used to anyone acknowledging her presence beyond orders and reprimands. Inside, the staff greeted her with soft nods, some with small smiles. Miriam rushed forward, first pulling her into a quick hug. "Child, you're back," she said breathlessly. "We've been thinking about you all morning. And your brother, he's better," Sifa replied warmly. "Thank you for yesterday." "Oh, hush," Miriam said, wiping her eyes. "You deserve every piece of joy coming your way." Tawanda cleared his throat gently. "Sifa, when you're ready, meet me in the study." There are things we need to discuss regarding the foundation. Sifa nodded. Yes, sir. He offered her a grateful look before heading toward his office. The moment he disappeared, the other maids swarmed Sifa with hugs, questions, relieved gasps. We were so scared when we heard Madame Naledi was here again. Is your brother really feeling better? Did they treat you well at the clinic? Sifa tried to answer each question patiently. These women had been her silent allies for months, sharing food, whispering warnings, patching up her cuts on tough days. But after a while, she excused herself to wash up and gather her thoughts before meeting Tawanda. The study felt different when she entered no longer a room full of intimidating authority. Now it felt like a space where she was allowed to breathe. Tawanda stood by the large window hands in his pockets. Papers lay scattered on the desk, financial reports, legal documents, statements from the foundation's board. The weight of leadership sat heavily on his shoulders. He turned when he heard her footsteps. Come in, Sifa. She approached slowly. Sir, how serious is everything with the foundation? He sighed. Serious enough that we must rebuild from the ground up. Many donors have withdrawn support after hearing about the scandal. A full audit is underway. Some programs may be suspended temporarily. Sifa's heart clenched. I'm sorry. Don't be, he said. Naledi's choices hurt many people, but your bravery may have saved even more. She lowered her gaze. Thank you. He gestured toward a chair. Sit. There is more you need to know. She obeyed, her hands folding neatly in her lap. First, he said gently, your new role. Her breath caught. I spoke with Mrs. Chulu this morning. She agrees you would be a strong asset to the foundation. With training, you could join the administrative team, perhaps even work directly with her on community outreach. Sifa's eyes widened. Madame Chulu wants me to work with her, Tawanda smiled softly. She said you have the heart for it, and I agree. Her voice cracked. Sir, I am grateful, but I am afraid I will fail. I don't have experience. I don't want to embarrass you or the foundation. It is impossible for you to embarrass anyone, he replied. And as for experience, everyone begins somewhere. What matters is your integrity and that you have an abundance. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, he said again gently. You are simply receiving what should have been yours long ago, respect, dignity, opportunity. For a moment they simply looked at each other, then he cleared his throat. There is something else, Sifa braced herself. I want you to know that investigators may still need your testimony. They may ask about the months leading up to the incident. It may feel uncomfortable, but your voice is essential. Sifa swallowed. I understand. I'll do whatever is needed. He hesitated. I know facing Naledi again must terrify you. A shiver ran through her. Yes, but I'll face her if I have to. He nodded slowly. And you will not face her alone. I promise you that. The way he said it, quiet, steady, unshakable, sent warmth through her chest. Thank you, she whispered, but he wasn't finished. And Sifa, regarding your future here, you don't have to stay in the staff quarters anymore. There is an unused room on the east wing. It's modest, but safe and private. You can move there today if you wish. Sifa blinked, stunned. Sir, that room is too big for someone like me. Someone like you, he echoed. And what exactly does that mean? She lowered her eyes. I am just a maid. He stepped closer, voice firm, yet soft. You are not just a maid. You are a young woman with remarkable strength, and you deserve a place where you can rest without fear. She felt tears gathering again. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said, nothing more. She hesitated only a moment before nodding. Yes, sir. He smiled. Good. Miriam will help you move your belongings. For a brief, fragile moment, silence stretched between them, filled with gratitude, vulnerability, and the faintest flicker of something dangerously close to tenderness. But then a sharp knock shattered the quiet. Enter, Tawanda called. An investigator stepped in, face grave. Mr. Mwale, we have a development. Something regarding your wife. Sifa stiffened immediately, her breath catching. Tawanda's voice was calm. What happened? We discovered communication logs. It seems Mrs. Naledi Mwale reached out to someone last night. Someone outside the police's knowledge. A contact she trusts. Sifa's heart thundered. The investigator continued. We believe she may have been planning something, or someone may be helping her. Tawanda's expression sharpened. Helping her do what? We don't know yet, the investigator replied. But we need to ask if Sifa is safe. The world seemed to tilt. Sifa's voice trembled. "Sir, do you think she is coming after me?" Tawanda turned to her, his gaze firm and protective in a way that made her chest tighten. "Let them try," he said quietly. "She will never hurt you again. Not while I live." Something deep inside Sifa shifted. A sense of safety she had never known. A sense of trust she could not explain. A sense of connection stronger than fear. And a shadow of danger rising again. For Naledi Mawale was not someone who surrendered quietly, and the storm, though weakened, had not passed. Not yet. The words hung in the air like a blade suspended above them. Someone might be helping Naledi. Sifa felt the temperature in the room drop as though invisible frost crept along the walls of the study. Her breath grew shallow. She clasped her hands tightly together on her lap, trying to steady the sudden tremor in her body. Tawanda turned to the investigator. "Who is the contact?" "We haven't identified them yet," the investigator replied. "But the communication was encrypted. Whoever she reached out to is resourceful." Sifa swallowed her voice, a mere whisper. "Sir, could she escape?" "Unlikely," the investigator said, "but she could influence someone from inside. She could ask someone to destroy evidence, intimidate a witness, or attempt to flee with assistance." His eyes flickered to Sifa for the briefest second. A knot tightened in her stomach. "We will increase security around the estate," the investigator continued, "and we strongly recommend that Miss Sifa avoid walking alone. Just until we confirm this contact is neutralized." Tawanda nodded. "Understood. I will take responsibility for her safety." When the investigator left, the silence that followed was suffocating. Sifa stared at her hands, the fear creeping slowly up her spine. "Sir," she whispered, "I thought it was over." Tawanda moved closer, lowering himself to her eye level. "Sifa, listen to me. Naledi may still hold hatred in her heart, but she no longer has power. Not legally, not socially, and certainly not in this house. But she's unpredictable," Sifa murmured. "Last night, she looked at me as if she won't get near you again," he interrupted gently. "I will personally ensure that." The warmth, the certainty in his voice steadied her trembling breath. She nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir." He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, hesitant, respectful, before letting it fall. "You don't have to call me sir anymore, you know," she blinked. I don't know what else to call you." His smile was faint, but soft. "Tawanda is fine." Her cheeks warmed. "Tawanda." He inhaled slowly, as if the sound of his name and her voice carried something unexpected, something neither of them dared name. But before either could speak again, Miriam appeared in the doorway. "Child." "Oh, I'm glad you're here." She rushed in. "We heard there are more investigators outside." "And oh Lord, one of them brought papers with your name on it," Sifa froze. "What papers?" "Not bad ones," Miriam said quickly. "They said you're needed as an official witness, but they want to make sure you're protected while giving your statement." Tawanda stood immediately. "I will accompany her." "No, sir," Sifa protested, rising too quickly. He raised an eyebrow. "Are you planning to argue with me on this? I just don't want to cause you more trouble." "You're not causing trouble," he said firmly. "You're bringing justice." Her lips parted soundlessly before she lowered her gaze. "Then, I will go." They walked together through the grand hallway as staff whispered, bowed, or simply stared. Some with admiration, some with curiosity, but none with the cold indifference she had grown used to. The investigator waiting near the front door greeted them and escorted them to a private sitting room. Papers were laid out neatly on a small wooden table. "Miss Sifa," the officer, said, "these documents outline your testimony. We simply need to record a detailed account of everything you witnessed. Audio recording only. No confrontation with Mrs. Naledi today." Relief washed over her shoulders, so intense she almost sagged. "Take your time," the investigator added gently. "We know this is difficult." Sifa sat, hands trembling slightly, but when she looked up, Tawanda stood behind her, silent, steady, a presence of quiet reassurance. She began speaking. Her voice shook at first, trailing into whispers as she recalled the phone call. She overheard the threats, the extra shifts, the insults, the night she cried silently in the maid's quarters. But the more she spoke, the more strength found her voice. Her tears fell, but her words remained steady. By the time she finished, the room felt lighter, as if something heavy had finally lifted from her chest. "That is all we need," the investigator said. "Thank you, Miss Sifa. Your bravery will help many." When he left, Tawanda sat beside her. "You did incredibly well," he said softly. She wiped her eyes. "I feel empty." That's what truth often leaves behind, he replied. But emptiness can be filled with better things. She managed a small smile. Later that afternoon, Sifa returned to the East Wing room Tawanda had offered. It was small, yes, but far larger and brighter than the cramped quarters she was used to. A clean bed, a small writing desk, a window overlooking the garden. She stepped inside slowly, almost afraid to disturb the air. Miriam followed, carrying a small stack of neatly folded clothes. Well, she said with a proud smile, look at you, child. A room like this suits you. It's too much, Sifa whispered. No, Miriam said. It's exactly right. As they unpacked Sifa's belongings, just a few clothes, a worn family photo, a small wooden comb carved by her father, Miriam kept glancing at her with a knowing look. What is it? Sifa finally asked. Miriam chuckled. Oh, nothing. Just wondering when you will realize how much Mr. Male cares for you. Sifa nearly dropped the photo in her hands. Miriam, oh please, Miriam scoffed. I may be old, but I'm not blind. The way he looks at you, child, it is not how a man looks at someone he merely feels responsible for. Heat flooded Sifa's cheeks. No, he's just kind. He's helping me because he feels guilty. Miriam shook her head firmly. Kind, yes. Guilty, maybe. But there is more to it. And you will see it when your heart is ready. Sifa looked away flustered. He is still a married man. Even if everything is falling apart, I don't want to disrespect that. Miriam nodded slowly. And that precisely is what makes you different. That is what makes him see you. Sifa's heart fluttered painfully. She didn't want these thoughts. She didn't want this feeling. But she couldn't deny that something inside her shifted every time he spoke her name. Still, she said quietly, it cannot happen, Miriam. It is not right. Love has its own timing, Miriam replied. And sometimes it grows where pain once lived. Sifa said nothing, her heart trembling. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the estate in warm orange light, Sifa sat on the small desk writing a letter to Quito. You will be proud of your sister one day, she wrote. I promise. A soft knock interrupted her. Come in, she called. The door opened and Tawanda stepped inside. Sifa stood quickly. Tawa, sir. He lifted a hand, smiling. Tawanda, remember? She nodded shyly. Tawanda. His gaze softened as he took in the room. I wanted to see how you were settling in. It's beautiful, she murmured. More than I ever hoped for. He hesitated, then stepped closer. There's another reason I came. Her breath caught. What is it? He held out a small folder. Your official appointment. Welcome to the Moal Foundation team. Her vision blurred as she took the folder, hands shaking. I don't know what to say. Say you'll try, he said gently. I'll try, she whispered. He smiled, a real smile, not weighed down by sorrow. Sifa, he said quietly, you've suffered so much, but I want you to know you have a place in this world and a future. You are not alone anymore. Her chest swelled painfully, beautifully. Tawanda. But before she could speak further, a loud knock echoed through the hallway. A guard appeared breathless. Sir, there's movement at the outer perimeter. Someone tried to breach the fence. Tawanda's expression hardened instantly. Who, we're not sure yet, but it appears someone is looking for Miss Sifa. Sifa froze. Tawanda stepped in front of her protectively. Lock down the estate, he ordered. No one touches her. Fear coated Sifa's throat. Tawanda, she whispered. He looked back at her, fire in his eyes. I won't let anything happen to you, he vowed. Not now, not ever. And for the first time, she believed him. The alarm bell's distant echo still hummed through the estate walls when the guard vanished down the hallway. Sifa stood frozen in the center of the room, her breath trembling in her chest. Every muscle in her body tightened as though the world itself were closing in around her. Tawanda, she whispered again, voice shaky. But he was already at the door, eyes sharp, shoulders tense with protective instinct. Stay behind me, he said, lowering his voice but never letting the edge of resolve fade. No one will touch you. Her heart pounded so hard she felt it in her fingers. Tawanda, you don't have to. I do, he said firmly. Because this house failed you once. I will not allow it to fail you again. Sifa swallowed hard. Fear twisted inside her, but so did something else, trust. A deep, instinctive trust she had never known before. Footsteps echoed from the eastern corridor, growing louder, urgent. Within seconds, 2 more guards arrived, panting slightly, expressions dark with tension. Sir, the taller one said, we scanned the perimeter. Someone triggered the motion sensors near the outer fence. Did you identify them? Tawanda asked sharply. No, sir. They fled before we reached the spot, but they left footprints, and he hesitated. And what? Tawanda's voice tightened. The guard exchanged a troubled glance with his partner. We found a scarf caught in the wire. He held up a piece of fabric, luxurious emerald green. Sifa's breath stilled. Melody's scarf. Tawanda took it, jaw clenching. So she escaped custody. The guard nodded. Or someone helped her escape. Sifa felt her knees weaken, fear rising like cold water around her chest. Tawanda, she whispered. What does she want? Why would she? She's desperate, he said quietly. And when people like Naledi are desperate, they reach for the one thing they think they can still control. Sifa's voice cracked. Me. He turned fully toward her, stepping closer, placing his hands gently but firmly on her shoulders. Listen to me. You are safe. She won't get past the security again. But she knows this estate. Sifa breathed. She knows the routes, the blind spots, the staff patterns. I've already changed them, he replied. Everything is different now. I will not underestimate her again. She nodded, though her fear still trembled inside her. The guards remained near the door, awaiting further orders. Tawanda straightened, lifting his chin with quiet authority. I want the entire perimeter reinforced, he ordered. Double patrols. No one enters or leaves without my approval. Yes, sir. And notify the investigators immediately. They need to know she's on the move. The guards hurried off. Sifa stepped forward, voice faint. Tawanda, if she's out there, if she's watching, what if she tries again tonight? I won't let that happen. He paused, then added softly. Not as long as I'm alive. Her heart squeezed painfully. He wasn't just speaking like a wealthy man protecting a staff member. He was speaking like a man whose heart had become entangled in ways he didn't yet understand or dare to admit. Still trembling, Sifa whispered, I don't want to bring danger into your life. Or this estate. Maybe I should leave. Maybe if I just disappear, she'll stop. Before she could finish, Tawanda stepped forward abruptly. No, he said, voice low but powerful. Don't ever say that. You leaving would not stop her. It would embolden her, and it would break everything we are trying to rebuild. His voice softened. I need you here, Sifa. The foundation needs you, and Keto needs stability. Her breath stilled. He said, I need you with such sincerity that her chest tightened painfully. But I don't want you harmed, she whispered. He shook his head. I'd rather face danger than let you face it alone. She looked at him, eyes shimmering with something deeper than gratitude, something neither of them dared to name. Moments later, Tawanda escorted her down the hall to the guest suite, located near his own wing, closer to security, farther from the outer walls. Guards stood posted at each entrance. It felt too much, too protective, too intimate. But when she hesitated at the door, he said quietly, Please, I'll sleep tonight only if I know you're safe. She stepped inside. The room, though modest compared to the mansion's standards, still felt luxurious to Sifa, far more than she deserved. A soft bed, a warm lamp, heavy curtains, a small sofa. She stood near the center, unsure what to do with herself. Tawanda lingered in the doorway. I placed your belongings here earlier. If there is anything else you need, anything at all, tell me. She nodded. Thank you. He hesitated before adding softly, Try to rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. She nodded again, unable to find words. He lingered a moment longer, watching her, with a mixture of concern, admiration, and something unspoken before finally closing the door. Sifa let out a shaky breath. She sank onto the edge of the bed. The room was quiet, too quiet, a silence she wasn't used to. Her heart pounded, her mind raced. She thought of Naledi's wild eyes, her threats, the scarf caught on the wire. She didn't know what scared her more, Naledi's hatred, or the fact that Tawanda cared for her in a way she wasn't sure she deserved. Meanwhile, across the estate, Tawanda stood in his darkened study, staring at the scarf in his hand. His thoughts churned like a storm. Naledi escaping custody meant two things. She was desperate, and she was dangerous. He placed the scarf on his desk, its green fabric glowing eerily in the lamplight. What are you planning, Naledi? He muttered to himself. And why can't you let her go? A knock sounded. Sir, a guard, said. The outer cameras picked up movement again, not at the fence this time, but near the storage sheds. Tawanda stiffened. Human, we're reviewing the footage now. Tawanda didn't wait. He rushed out of the study, the guard close behind. They descended the staircase and headed toward the security room. Screens flickered, guards spoke in low, urgent tones. Sir, one guard said quickly, look. On one of the grainy monitors, a blurry figure moved through the shadows near the shed, slipping between beams of moonlight, staying low, almost crawling. But it wasn't Naledi. It was a man. A man who matched the description of her rumored business partner, the one who handled transfers, the one Naledi always relied on, the one who had never been interrogated, Tawanda whispered. His driver. Sifa had mentioned she once heard Naledi and Dube whispering in the garage weeks ago, but Sifa had feared making accusations back then. Tawanda's hands curled into fists. Find him, he ordered. Now. The guard nodded and rushed out. But another guard checked additional screens and frowned. Sir, this might be worse. What now? Tawanda snapped. We found a second figure on another camera. Tawanda leaned in and froze. The second figure, smaller, hooded but unmistakably female, was crouched near the garden path watching the mansion windows, watching Sifa's window. Naledi, the blood drained from Tawanda's face. She's here, he whispered. She's on the grounds. Adrenaline surged through him. Send guards to the east wing immediately, he barked. Now he didn't wait for backup, he ran. He sprinted through the hallway, heart pounding, breath sharp, every instinct screaming that he was running against time. Inside the guest suite, Sifa sat at the bedside writing a note to Keto on a small piece of paper she planned to send with Miriam tomorrow. But then a faint scratching sound near the window. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She slowly turned. Outside, through the small slit in the curtain, a silhouette stood. A woman's silhouette. Tall, thin, unmistakable. Naledi. Sifa gasped, covering her mouth as her heart slammed violently against her ribs. Naledi pressed her face against the glass, pale, wild, twisted with hatred, her lips forming a silent snarl. Sifa stumbled back, trembling uncontrollably. A soft whisper escaped her lips. Tawanda, please. But before Naledi could move, before Sifa could scream, before the nightmare could unfold, the door burst open. Sifa Tawanda rushed inside, eyes blazing, breath-ragged guards flooding in behind him. He saw Naledi at the window. Saw the terror on Sifa's face, saw everything in one heart-stopping instant. Get her away from the window, Tawanda shouted. Guards grabbed Sifa, shielding her with their bodies. Naledi shrieked, pounding the glass, her voice muffled but full of venom. You ruined me. You ruined everything, A guard outside tackled her a moment later. Screams pierced the night. Struggling, cursing, chaos. Tawanda reached Sifa in 2 strides, grabbing her trembling face with both hands. Are you hurt? Did she touch you? Sifa shook her head, sobbing. No, but she was right there. I thought she would. He pulled her into his arms and held her as if letting go meant losing her forever. Sifa, he whispered, fiercely, voice trembling with emotion. He could no longer hide. I swear on my life, no one will ever hurt you again. She clung to him, crying into his chest. And in that moment, wrapped in his arms, breathing in his warmth, feeling his heart race against hers, she realized something she had never dared to imagine. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. And maybe, just maybe, she never would be again. The night had been fractured, split open by screams, flashing lights, and the sudden terrifying presence of a woman who refused to surrender to the justice closing in on her. But as the last echoes faded and the security officers dragged a thrashing, sobbing Naledi from the grounds, a heavier silence settled over the Moal estate. Inside the guest suite, Sifa remained locked in Tawanda's arms, still trembling from the shock that had seized her moments before. Her heart beat erratically against his chest, like a caged bird fighting for air. Tawanda held her firmly, not restraining but grounding her, protecting her, anchoring her in a reality where she was finally safe. It's over, he murmured, brushing his thumb gently across her tear-streaked cheek. She won't come near you again, not after tonight. Sifa couldn't speak yet. She could barely breathe. Her lips quivered, her fingers clinging desperately to the fabric of his shirt. The image of Naledi's twisted face pressed against the window kept replaying in her mind, those eyes that once radiated superiority now burned with hatred and desperation. She shivered uncontrollably. Tawanda cupped the back of her head. Breathe with me. Slowly, he demonstrated inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Sifa forced her lungs to follow. After a while, her sobs softened. Her breath steadied, but her fear remained pulsing faintly inside her. Come, Tawanda whispered. Sit. He helped her onto the edge of the bed, kneeling in front of her like a solemn vow. His eyes, usually calm and composed, now burned with a fierce protectiveness she had never seen directed at her or at anyone. Sifa, he said in a tone that was both gentle and unyielding. You are safe. I swear it. I thought she would break the glass, she whispered hoarsely. I thought she would get inside. I thought I know, he said softly, but she didn't, and she never will. Her fingers twisted together. Why? Why does she hate me so much? What have I ever done to her? He reached out, taking her hands in his. Her hatred has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with her fear. You saw the truth she tried to bury. You became the mirror she could not break. He paused. And mirrors terrify people who are drowning in their own sins. Sifa lowered her head. I didn't want to destroy her life. You didn't, he said firmly. She destroyed her own. You simply refused to be the sacrifice she needed. For a moment they remained silent, two souls breathing in the same fragile air, bound by the storm that had nearly torn them apart. A soft knock interrupted them. Tawanda rose to open the door. It was the chief security officer. Sir, the officer announced, Mrs. Naledi has been taken into custody again, this time under full restraints. She'll be transported to a secure psychiatric facility for evaluation before the criminal hearings. Sifa stiffened at the word psychiatric, but the officer continued. She was unstable, violent. She kept shouting Miss Sifa's name. He glanced sympathetically toward her, but she is no longer a threat. We've doubled security, reset all system codes, and placed guards at every wing. Tawanda nodded. Good, thank you. When the officer left, Tawanda turned back to Sifa. Her shoulders had relaxed, but her eyes still shimmered with the remnants of fear. You don't have to be afraid anymore, he repeated softly. Sifa inhaled shakily. I know, I'm trying. He sat beside her, leaving only a breath of space between them. You've been carrying fear for so long, he said, that letting go feels unnatural. But you're not alone now. She blinked rapidly, tears gathering again. I don't know how to be unafraid. You learn, he whispered. Slowly. One day at a time. And I will be here, every day, until the fear becomes only a memory. Her chest tightened. You have already done too much for me. No, he said firmly. Not enough. She lifted her gaze, startled. Tawanda's expression softened, open, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. Sifa, he said quietly, I don't know when it happened. Maybe the night of the banquet. Maybe the night you stood up to her. Maybe when you cried in the garden. Or when you spoke the truth despite your fear. His voice softened further. But somewhere along the way, your courage awakened something in me I thought I had lost. Her heart stopped. I look at you, he said, and I see strength wrapped in gentleness, pain wrapped in grace. And he exhaled deeply. I care for you. More than I should, more than I expected. Sifa's breath caught. She looked away quickly, heart trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. Tawanda, her voice cracked, you are still married. Something flickered across his face, pain, sorrow, acceptance. I was married in name, he said quietly. Not in truth. Not anymore. That marriage died long before last night. I stayed because I believed I could fix something that had already broken. He shook his head. But Naledi chose a path I cannot follow. He reached for her hand but stopped just before touching it. I'm not asking you for anything, he whispered. Not now. Not soon. I know your heart is fragile. Your life is changing. And you deserve time. Space. Healing. Sifa's eyes filled, tears spilling silently. But I needed to tell you, he said, because you should know the truth behind every promise I make to protect you. Sifa wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he replied softly. Just know that you matter. Deeply. Her chest ached, but not from pain. From something like warmth blooming after years of cold. She turned toward him, tears shining. Tawanda, thank you. For believing in me. For saving me. For seeing me. He smiled gently. I didn't save you, Sifa. You saved yourself. I only stood beside you. Before she could answer, Miriam burst into the room. Child, she gasped. I came as soon as I heard, oh Lord, are you hurt? Sifa shook her head quickly. No, Miriam, I'm fine. Miriam turned to Tawanda, hands on hips. Sir, with all due respect, this girl needs warmth, soup blankets, and a full hour of prayer after what she just survived. Not interrogations and alarms. Despite the tension, a soft, breathy laugh escaped Sifa's lips. Even Tawanda cracked a weary smile. You're right, Miriam, he said. Take care of her. Miriam nodded proudly. I always do. As she ushered Sifa toward the bed, Tawanda paused at the door. Sifa, he said softly, rest tonight. Tomorrow, The foundation begins its new path. And so do you. Her heart fluttered. Good night, Tawanda. His smile was soft, lingering. Good night, Sifa. When he left, Miriam wrapped her arms around Sifa tightly. Oh, child, she whispered. Your life is changing. I feel it. I've lived long enough to recognize destiny when it knocks. Sifa held onto her tears, falling silently. I'm scared, Miriam, she murmured. Miriam kissed her forehead. Of course you are. That's how every great journey begins. Outside, the guards patrolled. The estate lights glowed. The air carried the lingering remnants of danger, but also the first hints of dawn. And in the quiet of her room for the first time, Sifa allowed herself to imagine a future not built on fear, but on hope, on healing, on courage, on something tender forming between two wounded hearts. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. But tonight she was safe. She was held. She was seen. And she was no longer alone. Sometimes life pushes the quietest souls into storms they never asked for. But it is in those storms that we discover who we are and who stands with us. Sifa's journey teaches us that silence is not weakness and endurance is not submission. Speaking the truth, even when your voice shakes, is an act of incredible courage. And sometimes the people we fear will judge us become the people who finally protect us. In life, true strength often grows from pain, and new beginnings rise from collapse. No matter how dark the night, there is always a dawn waiting for those who refuse to break. If this story moved your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And if you love emotional African folktale dramas, remember to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter.